In my video about making cuts, I mentioned how I quickly cut Turgid from my Shattergang Brothers deck. Now on paper, I look like a crazy person. I'm passing up on the opportunity to pay 3 mana, sacrifice an O1, and steal 3 creatures from my opponents. And to make it even worse, I also mentioned how I wanted to cut Corvold. Now, if you don't know me very well, you probably want to bury me in a hole. With all that being said, I do have a reason for doing so. See, the problem is, they're just too good. Wait, what? One thing you should know about my Shattergang Brothers deck is that it's dookie. It's almost an auto loss to any token deck, it takes way too much mana to get going, and only really wins if I get to recover quickly after a board wipe, or I have a stupid fast start. I intentionally built this deck to be two things. One, not as dependent on the commander as my other decks, and two, the most fair deck you could possibly think of. Now, when I say fair, I don't mean it provides an equal play experience for everyone. I mean fair in the sense that it doesn't do anything super off the wall or combo-like. See, I thought about this deck after realizing that I really only played combo at that point. And it's not that all combos are unfair, but I was getting tired of the play pattern it always created against other decks that did play fair. Since my deck library consisted almost entirely of combo decks, that meant I would often play them in games against players with lower power decks or decks without combos. Even if one of these non-combo decks were heavily tuned, an interactive game with a typical build-up would be cut short by me comboing off against an unprepared pod. Now, granted, bragging rights from winning a game really satisfied my urges for a long time, but it got to a point where it felt unsatisfying. Long story short, I wanted this deck to be composed entirely of cards that you look at and think, oh, not bad. I mean, honestly, that's how modern Green-Black X decks played for years. It's a proven strategy. And the combination of all these cards would generate enough value to win me the game, as opposed to what I'm used to, which is drawing or tutoring up an infinite combo. So basically I wanted to play mid-range in Commander. Yeah, that sounds about right. Now if you're thinking, wait, Corvold and Turgid don't go infinite, then you'd be right. But the problem is what happens in games when I do draw them versus when I don't draw them. Now, it's no secret that any given Commander deck has a range of games it can play that all vary in power. Sometimes you can draw Sol Ring and play 2 turns ahead of schedule, and sometimes you can keep a sketchy 2-lander, brick out for 5 turns, and complain really loudly about it. Now, oftentimes, a Sol Ring start can be identified as an outlier by a decently experienced player when it comes to deck evaluation or threat assessment. But there can be other cards that skew a game that are more subtle. In the case of my Shattergang deck, Turgid and Corvold are both leaps and bounds stronger than any other card in the deck. So why does that make a difference? If you draw them, don't they just help your chances of victory? Well, yeah, they do, but they also leave me with the same problem I had when I was getting frustrated with my combo decks. See, I really only ever play Shattergang in 6 to 7 power level games, whatever the hell that means. These cards, if left unanswered, would just crush a table of lower power decks. Which brings me back to the same situation as I was with my combo decks. Now the average Shattergang game went much differently. It was usually a much slower build-up before I had established a winning board. So naturally these games came completely out of left field. And to me, it just felt differently than if I were to start on Sol Ring. Turgid and Corvold functioned essentially as the poster children for my game plan, and they by no means represented how I actually imagined the deck playing from game to game. These two cards are by far the best at what they do. Corvold takes my sacrifices and turns them not only into more cards, but into a huge beater. Turgid takes Shattergang's ability and turns it not only into just removal, but threats as well. In an average game, I'm not expecting to have cards that execute my game plan as efficiently as they do. So the difference I felt when drawing Sol Ring was marginal. I just got to do what I wanted to, but a little bit faster. Contrast this to playing these cards, and it's like I was playing an entirely different deck that was way out of the range I wanted it to be. Now, combine this with the fact that if I ever wanted to rematch someone after playing this deck, they'd want to take out a high power deck, since they're presuming that there's a higher density of these super strong cards than there actually is. Additionally, they'll probably target me harder knowing I have these really strong cards in my deck, and this is where the second half of the problem originates. I built this deck specifically to not be super overpowered, and it really isn't, but that's not the perception the deck actually gives off when I play those cards. As far as how to remedy this, there are a couple different routes you can travel. You can lean into the fact that these cards are really strong by upgrading the rest of your deck around them. Knowing you have Corvold in your deck may make you want to play more fetches, and having Turgid may make you want to play more fleshbag type effects. You can also just play more tutors to ensure you have access to these great cards more often. However, this idea isn't really as practical when it comes to working on a budget or otherwise trying to maintain a lower power level like I am. If my Shattergang deck costs $50 to make and I upgrade it with an $8 card, it's not reasonable to buy a bunch of other $5+ cards to match that since I'm restricted with my budget. Additionally, I'm not only intentionally trying to keep my deck within a medium power level, but the limit of what a Shattergang Brothers deck can actually do is probably much lower than what Corvold or Turgid games would look like on average. So even if I choose to lean into the strength of these high power cards, I'm only making the issue smaller, not entirely eliminating it. On the flip side, you can just cut these cards, which is what I've been working to do. I've had Turgid cut for a while now, and Corvold is on his way out. The only reason I haven't yet is because I don't play this deck very often anymore, and I'm likely scrapping it altogether. These cards are particular in that they have similar cards that are worse than them that I can play instead. Instead of Corvold, I can play more Moldervine Reclamation effects. There's a ton of these, and my deck doesn't play all of them. Instead of Turgid, I play Gisa Glorious Resurrector. It does something really similar to Turgid, but it only triggers on my upkeep, so it gives a larger window of opportunity for my opponents to react. There's also likely plenty of opportunity to play cards that still support your game plan while not doing exactly what these S-tier cards do. In a sacrifice deck especially, there are so many different avenues you can go down to get value out of sacrificing. I also want to talk about something similar that I've wanted to get off my chest for a while now, but it doesn't really have enough substance to be its own video. That is, stuffing an infinite combo into a non-combo deck. Now, look, I am no stranger to infinite combos or combo decks in general. The first part of this video was literally me talking about how I play too much combo. However, there's a big difference between a combo deck and a non-combo deck that also happens to play an infinite combo. With this, you can run into a similar situation that I was describing earlier when it comes to the range of games a deck can play. And in this case, it's the uppermost extreme. If the absolute best game your deck can play is by comboing off really early, that causes a host of problems. The first of these reasons is exactly what I mentioned before. Everyone who plays against your deck is now going to view it as a combo deck whether you like it or not. The second of these is that your play patterns will most likely tend towards finding that infinite combo. If that's the quickest and easiest way your deck can win, why not just go for it every game? This can then alter your deck building decisions in a way that may not be in line with what you wanted when you first made the deck. If I play a Zaxara deck that really focuses on X-Spells and Hydras or whatever, but I also happen to play Freed from the Real, I'm going to try to find Freed from the Real every single game. And without adding tutors or whatever, you've introduced a really inconsistent way to build a combo deck, which is likely not what anyone wants. Long story short, if you're going to play an infinite or otherwise game-winning combo in your deck, I recommend leaning into it and converting to a full-on combo deck, or just not playing it at all. So in summary, it can be a helpful exercise to evaluate whether a card in your deck is too strong. If you're like me and try to keep decks of all different power levels, these super strong cards can really tip the scales on some of your lower powered decks. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm really interested to hear your thoughts on including infinite combos especially. I used to be a full-on Jonathan combination, like I said earlier, so my thoughts have changed on this in the last few years. Please consider subscribing if you're not already, and I'll see you all in the next video.